Stephen Schwartzman, and Mary Barra of General Motors there to his left. The great Philip Rucker, good enough to join us there from Washington. And again, Philip, I know these are almost literally hot off the presses, but what to make of these increased sanctions on Iran?
Well, good morning. The Iranian sanctions are quite significant, and it's a sign, I think, from the Trump administration that they intend to hold Iran accountable for any development of nuclear weapons and any testing of missiles. It's been a huge campaign issue for Donald Trump over the course of the last year. He talked about the Obama administration as too timid, and I think the Trump White House now is, and the Treasury Department in the case of these sanctions, are going to try to show that he's going to respond with action, not just with words.
Now, House Speaker Paul Ryan is among those who are already praising these, but these do come after rather vague warnings issued both by the National Security Advisor and the president himself. They were formally put on notice. As the president said today on Twitter, Iran was playing with fire. Is this some heft to back up, again, what was left to be read via tea leaves?
I think so. The statements that were issued earlier in the week, including by Michael Flynn, the National Security Advisor, as you noted, were rhetorical, really. I mean, they were strong words, but nonetheless, they were just words. And these sanctions are more serious. They're imposing a penalty on a number of individuals and entities that were involved in the creation of these nuclear materials. And so I assume if Iran continues along this line, Trump's going to have more sanctions and more threats and try to have more action. He wants to show that he's going to take on this threat in a more aggressive and combative way.
We are seeing some shifts then in foreign policy on a number of fronts, Philip. Meanwhile, also, as I just mentioned, executive actions are in the offing today as well as they regard Wall Street regulations. What can you tell us?
Well, this is a big deal. The president's going to sign an executive order later today that begins the process of unraveling the Dodd-Frank legislation. This was the set of regulations on the financial industry that were created in the aftermath of the Wall Street collapse at the beginning of Obama's term. Again, it's something that Trump campaigned against. It's been a huge priority for the Republican Party for many years. Republican leaders in Congress are eager to see this law overturned, and I think the Trump administration, at least initially here, is going to try to do everything they can by executive order to peel this back and really weaken the regulatory system.
And yet, Philip, we saw in the pool spray of that meeting that Donald Trump had earlier today with top business leaders, we saw representatives from Wall Street, Goldman Sachs there in the room. And the pushback here can be, but you also said you were going to drain the swamp, and it feels like maybe you're pouring more water into it.
That's exactly right. Look, the person in the White House who's overseeing this policy rollout is Gary Cohn. He's the National Economic Council Director, the top economic advisor to the president, but he previously was a very high-ranking executive at Goldman Sachs. He comes from Wall Street. He has the financial industry's interests at heart. Not that that's wrong necessarily, but it's different. This is not some sort of populist middle-class person from out in the country trying to fight for the people. He's trying to institute here a framework that I think can help the banks and the financial industry grow. And in Trump's theory of economics, that would trickle down. And the better off the banks are, the more jobs can be created by middle-class people and so forth.
I want to turn to some CBS News polling as well out this morning as it relates to the president's travel ban. It shows that 45% of Americans agree with the order. Some 51% do not. The number, though, when you look at responses by party, as we see here on the screen, break down far more along partisan lines in the mid-80s for approving or not as it regards the GOP and the Democrats. Does this number, though, overall, 51-45, does that surprise you?
It doesn't. I think this is a pretty divisive issue. It's certainly being seen right now through a partisan political lens. I think these numbers, though, go up and down based on the terror threat. In the wake of San Bernardino and some of those other attacks last year, you saw in public opinion surveys, Americans feeling more scared, feeling like they wanted tougher security measures and border measures. And Donald Trump rode that that wave in his campaign. And I think, to the extent where we might potentially have a terror attack in the future, we could maybe see these numbers fluctuate some more. But clearly the Trump White House is calculating that this ban is going to be popular with the people, not only with the people that voted for him, but try to peel into some of that Clinton turf a little bit.
Now, you used the word calculate, so I'll get you out of here on this one, Phil. Yeah. The political calculus of this, because the ban in place would not have stopped any terror attack on American soil, dating back and including the 9/11 attacks. And so is the Trump White House, if nothing else, hoping that those in favor of this don't read too much into it?
I think so. It's a complicated issue, but they're hoping that Americans will just look at this and conclude that President Trump is strong, that he wants tougher borders, that he wants better vetting of people coming into the United States from overseas. That's a very basic sort of understanding of this. It's a much more complicated and nuanced situation. And as you pointed out, the actual ban that was implemented last weekend in the presidential executive order would not have caught the man who committed the San Bernardino attack, for example.